Hello, I will be doing my informative speech on Ted Bundy. So let's get right into it. In Ted Bundy's childhood, he was abused by his stepfather. He didn't have really a good relationship with his stepdad because he was always used to being the only one in his mom's life. So growing up, he had a really hard time with his stepfather. As a child, it suggested that he would kill dogs and cats starting at the age 8 to 14, and his mom thought that was really odd behavior, but never really did anything about it, I would say. Throughout school, he was kind of a loner. He kind of stayed to himself. He tried to play sports, and he wasn't really athletically there. He was very academically inclined, and so that's kind of where he got a lot of his popularity from, was kind of just being smart, and I guess a lot of people used him for that. At age 22, he met his girlfriend Elizabeth in 1969, and they dated for about 5 years. In about 1972, Ted Bundy graduated with a psychology degree from University of Washington, and he began law school in 1973. Like I said, his earliest crimes, he committed, killing animals. There was a possible victim in 1961 of a lady named Ann Burr, and it was said that Ted Bundy might have killed her whenever he was 14 years old. He worked as a paper boy. He threw newspapers outside of homes, and this little girl was killed in her bed of a home in which he would deliver to. So there was a lot of speculation that he might have killed her, but that was never confirmed. But that's whenever they think that he began his earliest crime. In January of 1974, he broke into an apartment of a girl named Karen Sparks. While she was sleeping, he raped and beat her. She was in a coma for about 10 days, and she actually ended up living. February, just the next month of 1974, he broke into the apartment again of another Washington student named Linda Ann, and he ended up beating and killing her as well. He abducted her, and her remains were later found. Throughout 1974, while he was in law school, Ted committed about 7 more murders within Washington and Colorado. He was suspected to have killed more, but he only later confessed to 7. Around the same exact time of 1974, he was in Utah, and he murdered and raped 2 women there as well. He was then arrested, and he stood trial for multiple accounts of crimes and was found guilty for some of them in 1976, and he was awaiting trial for 15 years of prison time. But in 1977, Bundy escaped, and I'm pretty sure he escaped through a library window. He asked one of the guards if he could make a phone call, and as one of the guards was being distracted by a woman, he saw his opportunity to escape, and he jumped from on high level and escaped for 6 days, but then was brought back. He then later escaped again in 1978 for a week, but then was brought back to jail again. I'm pretty sure he escaped in his cell, whenever people would take a shower and the water would be loud, he was able to get some type of cutting, something to cut, and he cut at the top of the ceiling and escaped through there somehow. But he was later brought back after a week, and whenever this happened in Florida, and whenever he was brought back, it was said that he was convicted of killing 2 women in the Chi Omega sorority house in Florida while he had been escaped, and he also assaulted 2 other women in the house as well, and so that was like a really big scandal, really big case. In 1980, he was sentenced to the death penalty and charged for his murders. Throughout 1984 to 1989, Ted Bundy confessed to about 30 different murders, even though we know, speculated that there was way more. In 1924 1989 of January 24th, Ted Bundy died at age 42 in the electric chair. He was one to be one of the most known serial killers in history, and was thought to have killed over 100 women. So yeah, I got a lot of my information online and also was just educated on this growing up as well. I think that everybody kind of is familiar with the Ted Bundy case. I watched a lot of videos, and there is a movie on Netflix called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, and Zac Efron plays Ted Bundy, and he did a really good job, and I feel like that movie was pretty good representation of just everything that has happened throughout his years of killing. And yeah, him and his girlfriend ended up breaking up, obviously, of 5 years whenever he was suspected of all these crimes. In the end, she tried to get him to confess to her about the stuff that he did, and he did, and it traumatized her and her child, in which grew up around Ted. So yeah, that is my speech on Ted Bundy, and hope you enjoyed.